Greetings everyone. This year we celebrate All Saints' Day on a Sunday, kind of a rare event. A day when we celebrate all those brothers and sisters of ours who have gone before us, marked with the sign of faith, and who inspire us on our journey here below. And often we tend to idealize the saints. And I want to give you just very briefly over the next few minutes a few examples of saints. First of all, that show that they came from all walks of life, all cultures, all backgrounds. And second of all, how they overcame huge odds. They didn't let life's challenges and tragedies bring them down. I'd like to take a few examples, first of all, from the Bible of characters who overcame huge odds, but also who made big mistakes. Moses and Abraham both were called in their late 70s. Moses had a speech impediment and resisted God's call to be his prophet. In the New Testament, John Mark was rejected by Paul and yet overcame this rejection to become Peter's scribe and wrote the Gospel of Mark. Timothy had huge problems with his ulcers and he continued to serve despite this ill health. In the Old Testament, Hosea's wife was a prostitute and cheated on him many times. Amos, his only training when he was called was pruning fig trees. He was a farmer. Jacob initially used to manipulate people a lot. David had an affair. Moses and Paul both committed murders, so they had death on their hand before they changed their lives around. Jonah, when he was called, initially ran away from God. Miriam used to love to gossip. Both in the Old Testament, Gideon, and New Testament, St. Thomas, they both doubted. Jeremiah and Elijah were amazing prophets, but they had times of depression and even suicidal. Noah got drunk. Did I mention that Moses and Paul and Peter all had a very short fuse? Many times with the saints, you'll see like contrasts, incredible contrast between two personalities. St. Thomas Aquinas was a genius, one of the great geniuses of all time. St. John Marie Vianney failed all his exams. St. Vincent de Paul was a man of the cities. St. Anthony lived in the desert. St. Peter, the first pope, was an illiterate fisherman. And St. Paul went to the best schools of his time and spoke 4 languages. St. Joan of Arc led armies, and St. Francis promoted and loved peace. St. Catherine of Siena took on the popes, and little Teresa of Lisieux was a sweet little sister that nobody knew about. St. Bruno was so serious, and St. Philip Neri was a big joker. St. Elizabeth was a queen. St. Conrad was a doorman. St. Benedict Labry was homeless. He was a vagrant as well. St. Gemma was a mystic. St. Zita was a cook. St. John Marie Vianney was a parish priest. The saints overcame amazing odds. St. Linus, the first pope after St. Peter, was actually a former slave. St. Felicity was a slave girl. St. Patrick was kidnapped and was a slave also. St. David of Wales was conceived through rape. St. Theodore was the illegitimate son of a circus performer and a prostitute. St. Bartolomeo had a drunken father and had to accompany him from the bar most evenings. Saints Mary Magdalene and St. Mary of Egypt were prostitutes. St. Lucia and St. Bartolongo were part of satanic cults. St. German and Margaret of Costello, both handicapped and blind, and parents hid them in shame when they were children. Agatha and Lucy were Roman martyrs, and it was their boyfriends who reported them to the Romans. St. Fabiola had 2 husbands and was very poor. St. Monica, before her marriage, had a problem with drink. And St. Augustine had a problem with lust. St. Pierre Toussaint and St. Josephine Bakhita both were former slaves and overcame slavery to become saints. St. Pierre Toussaint is one of the first African-American saints. And Josephine Bakhita was kidnapped as a little girl in Sudan and sold into slavery, crossed the Sahara on foot and ended up in Italy, where she was adopted and eventually became a sister and became a saint. St. Martin de Porres, He lived about 500 years ago in Lima in Peru. He overcame racism and severe social prejudice to become a Dominican and in the end a saint. Saints came from all walks of life. Teachers, Elizabeth Ann Seton, Don Bosco, St. Angela. Kings and queens, St. Louis of France, St. Elizabeth of Hungary, Mary of Scotland. Husbands and wives, the parents of St. Teresa of Lisieux, Mr. and Mr. Martin. St. Isidore and his wife. Church cleaners, St. Theobald. Waitresses, Margaret of Louvain. Doormen, St. Conrad and St. Andre of Quebec. Cooks, St. Zita. Bakers, our own William of Rochester. Lawyers, is it possible? It sure is. There's a few lawyers even in heaven. So you have St. Thomas More, St. John Story, St. Bartolomeo. Doctors, Comus and Damien. Soldiers, St. Casimir, St. Ignatius, St. Martin. Teenagers, St. Dominic Savio, he was 14. Maria Goretti was 13. And Joan of Arc was 19. Housewives, St. Dorothy and St. Helen. Catholics married to abusive husbands, St. Monica. St. Zita had 4 alcoholic sons. St. Francis had an abusive father. The first Christian saint, Mary, the mother of Jesus, a girl of 14, endured gossip about her pregnancy and fleeing Herod, who was the mass murderer, to Egypt, all before she was 16. They didn't let abuse, alcoholism, deformity, trials bring them down. No problem is greater than God, and to accept that is to begin to become a saint.